Ladies and gentlemen, are the Gospels historically reliable or unreliable?
That's not really a useful dichotomy. Reliability is more of a spectrum.
Bart Ehrman, who says he was a Christian at one point but is now an atheist, claims that we can't conclude the Gospels are reliable. He says they're unreliable, although he will admit the Gospels have a lot of truth in them. Well, is Bart wrong about the Gospels? And if so, why is he wrong?
Everyone who questions the Bible is wrong. Duh.
Well, what we're going to do today is ask the man who debated Bart recently, who by most accounts did so very well. Today, we're going to focus in on this excellent debate he had with Bart Ehrman. I think it's going to be very edifying.
I'm not sure if I've used the word edifying since I've left Christianity, but that works. Let's get edified. Welcome to Paulogia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians. And as always, when those claims involve a scholar, we like to bring on that very scholar to address the points head on. So, Dr. Bart Ehrman, New York Times bestselling author and world-renowned scholar of the Bible, welcome back to the channel.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me again.
If we're being graced with your presence, I assume you have a brand new course coming up that we should all be excited about?
The course is called The Genius of the Acts of the Apostles. It's trying to show how brilliant this book is. There are things within the story you wouldn't notice unless somebody points out to you that, wow, that is interesting. If somebody really thinks that the book of Acts is 100% accurate, they're going to have difficulty with what they hear in this course. So I'm just giving you the information, and you can deal with it any way you want.
We'll come back to that very provocatively named course in a bit. But first, I want to dampen your mood a little with the antics of a Catholic apologist named Jimmy Akin.
Oh, no, I like Jimmy.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Then you and I have had very different experiences. He critiqued an article I wrote for your blog and was not charitable.
He cherry picks the data hard, and it appears he's not even familiar with some of the sources that he's citing. And I don't know whether that's he's ignorant of the historical record, or he's being deceptive, or he's just being super sloppy.
Anyway, your debate with Jimmy was about 2 years ago, back in 2022.
Yeah. You know, I had never debated a Catholic apologist, and I guess I never realized there were Catholic apologists. The apologists I knew were like, conservative evangelicals. And so, yeah, that was good. That was fun. Yeah.
And he doesn't look very Catholic on first inspection, so.
No, he's very Texan. But the thing is, he's a really good guy, and he's a nice guy, and he's a knowledgeable guy. And that isn't true of all the people I debate.
Excellent. Well, for some reason, Jimmy's been doing a bit of a victory lap tour, talking to people like Frank Turek, Council of Trent, and Pence of Aquinas, doing debate reviews, going over the content and his rhetorical strategies. And so I wanted to get your review of his reviews.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Well, what we're going to do today is ask the man who debated Bart recently, who by most accounts did so very well. So here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Akin, who gets a round of applause for so calmly debating somebody who really is a good debater.
But I thought you brilliantly did this in an efficient way.
In the same way, seeing you debate Bart Ehrman, I was like, all right, here you go. You've got this renowned in certain circles scholar who's used to debates and is used to debating heavyweights. I wasn't sure how it would go. You absolutely trounced him, if I can say that with charity towards Bart Ehrman. I was shocked. I couldn't believe how well you did.
Were these hosts themselves Roman Catholic?
They are evangelical.
Evangelicals.
Oh, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. No, 2 of them are Catholic.
Huh. Okay. Whatever. Some people don't like broccoli.
So I knew I was going to do well. What I didn't know was how mad I was going to make him. Because
you made him mad?
No. I didn't know.
Oh, I see. Prior. You wasn't sure how he was going to react to that.
Exactly. Because I've seen instances where he turns really cold and really angry and is ruthless in debates. I was watching one debate that he had with James White. White at one point tried to make himself sound superior to Ehrman on a textual matter. And Ehrman flipped and became incredibly cold and raked James White over the coals in the cross-examination period. And it was humiliating for White to watch Ehrman do this to him.
And I didn't want this debate to go that way. I wanted this to be a friendly debate. So what I did was I made a point of being as friendly as possible with Bart, both before the debate and during the debate. And I even had pre-planned things that I was going to do. Like at one point I was talking about the fact that Bart has written a whole book on the existence of Jesus, where he refutes Jesus mythicists. And so I said he deserves credit for that. Let's all give him a big round of applause. And people did. Bart wrote an entire book refuting that point of view, and I think he deserves credit. Let's give Bart a big hand of applause. Thank you. And this is something that Bart and I agree about. Jesus really existed. High five. Yeah. And as far as I know, I'm the only person ever to high five Bart during a debate. But it was another trying to be nice.
So I knew that I would do well. I didn't know if I'd be able to keep things friendly.
Yeah.
But I was, and that was great.
So I'm kind of hesitant to say this because I did behave differently at that debate. And it wasn't because I felt he was pandering to me. It's because we had had a long personal conversation ahead of time. And I learned a bit about his life, and I just didn't feel like going after him.
Fair enough. Would that be a good strategy against you, though? Do you feel like that?
No, not particularly. Like my best friends who my door, when we get in a debate, man, I go for it.
Cool.
But the thing is that I'd be surprised. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you listened to the debate. I didn't come out of there thinking I got creamed at all. I mean, in terms of the substance, I mean, I was intentionally pulling my punches a bit because I didn't see any point in kind of going after him. But the substance, I mean, well, you'll probably get into some of the substance.
I will.
It's like, wow, really? Okay.
In terms of deciding on the topic, I wanted to debate gospel reliability, and I proposed that the resolution be the gospels are unreliable.
Because why did you decide that?
Well, normally skeptics want to debate it the other way around. They want it to debate, are the Gospels reliable? And they want to put the burden on the believer to show that they are reliable. Because in a formal debate, whoever takes the affirmative position has the burden of proof. Mm-hmm. And so they want to put the burden of proof on the believer. But I think it's healthy to look at issues from both perspectives. It shouldn't always be one way. And so I thought, well, we've done the resolution, the Gospels are reliable dozens of times. Let's turn it around for once and put the burden on the skeptic. And so I wanted him to take the affirmative with the Gospels are unreliable, just to see how well the skeptic can make their case when it's under cross-examination from a believer. It seems only fair to me.
Well, it was really weird. And, and I thought, well, that's, so the affirmative side is debating the negative. Okay. Right. And, I thought, well, I don't care. The truth is the truth. And I can show they're unreliable. I mean, it's possible to show they're unreliable. It's not that hard. There are contradictions all over the place. So, I mean, how hard can it be? And so it's like, I thought, okay, I'll do that. It's a little bit weird to do it. And in some ways, it's really much harder to show that an ancient document is reliable than to show that it's unreliable. Because to show something is unreliable, you can point to contradictions, for example. Well, what if the document doesn't have any contradictions? Does that make it true? No, it just means that that's one way you go about showing it's unreliable. And so, so it's very hard to show that. To show something's reliable has kind of a low burden of proof on some levels, but it still has to stack up against itself. It can't have contradictions, and it cannot contradict what we know about from external sources. And that, of course, is where the Gospels get into trouble, especially in some of the things that Jimmy wanted to talk about, the birth narratives. I mean, not only do they contradict each other up and down the map, but also when you get to something like Luke, well, both Matthew and Luke, they just don't stack up against what we know about the world at the time.
My personal frustration with the debate was the lack of agreement on the definition of reliability. Because you two are using different standards, It seems you two are having entirely different debates.
The key terms in this resolution, as far as I'm concerned, are, first, historically reliable. In this debate, I will not be talking about whether they are religiously, theologically reliable. I'm not talking about whether they're reliable about what you ought to believe about God or Christ or anything else. I'm interested in the historical question. Do they describe what actually happened? Are they reliable? And when I say reliable, do I mean are they entirely reliable, mainly reliable, partially reliable, not at all reliable? I think these are, there are different ways to approach this. My questions are actually fairly simple. They are, if the Gospels say something happened, did it happen? If they say that Jesus said something, did he say it? If they say that Jesus did something, did he do it?
We're not here to debate faith tonight. As Bart said, we're looking at the Gospels from a historical perspective and what a historian could make of them. Well, from a historical perspective, if you wanted to verify that the Gospels are 100% accurate in everything they say, you'd have to go back in time and check to see if every claim can be verified with your own eyes. But without a time machine, you won't be able to do that. And so we're not debating inerrancy tonight. All we're debating is reliability. And reliability is a spectrum. You can have some sources that are 100% accurate, which would make them inerrant, or you could have some sources that are 100% inaccurate. Nothing they say is right. But our question is not a spectrum question. We're asking a yes or no question. Are the Gospels reliable or are they unreliable? So how would we determine that, given that reliability is a spectrum? I mean, where would you draw the line on that spectrum and say, okay, if a document gets up to this point or higher, it's reliable, but if it's below this point, we're going to call it unreliable? Well, one place you could draw the line is right at the top, at the 100% level, and say, okay, unless a document is inerrant, unless it's 100% right on everything, we're going to say it's unreliable. When reading the Gospels, don't be Mr. Spock. Don't expect more precision than the evangelists are trying to provide. The evangelists are intending to give us gist accounts, and the important thing is that the gist is accurate. Like, we're going to be at the planet in 2 hours. We've seen the Gospels are right on the gist lots. And as long as the gist is accurate, the Gospels are doing what they are intending to do, which is give us a historically reliable account of the gist or essence of Jesus' life and teachings. So judged by their own standards, yes, the Gospels are historically reliable.
Yeah, well, it seemed to me we were, because, to say that something is basically reliable, how do you define basically? I mean, and a gist, how do you define a gist? I mean, I've written about this a good bit, actually. When you say the gist of something is right, would it be fair to say that, Jimmy and I had a debate on the Gospels in San Diego in 1958, and his people thought he won, and people like me thought I won. Is that just right? Yeah, that's pretty right, except for like the details. So, the way, I don't know if I did this in the debate, but what I usually do is say, it's like, if you're asking a friend for directions for how to get to the grocery store, and they say, you go a mile here, then you turn right, and in 20 feet, you'll need to turn left. And you end up someplace else, right? You follow the directions exactly, and you're not there. And you find this happens, like maybe you've asked directions from this person 20 times, and this has happened 6 times. Well, okay, well, he's right 14% of the time, so basically he's right. But are you going to trust him for directions?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to trust him for directions? No. And so the idea the details don't matter, or that like it's usually right, that's not reliable. Or we don't consider anybody reliable who lies, 30% of the time, even though most of the time they are telling the truth. Oh, right. So it is a different understanding. And if he wants to think that the gist is right, well, right, what's the gist? Let's say the gist, for example, is that Jesus was born and that he grew up in Nazareth and that he was crucified by Pontius Pilate. Therefore, the Gospels are accurate because they all say that. Okay. What's it give you exactly?
Documents tend to make different kinds of claims. Some of them are major claims, which deal with the most important facts and themes and events that the document discusses. Some of them are intermediate claims, which are not the most important, but still important facts, themes, and events. And then there are lesser claims, like individual details and minor themes and events. And I would propose, in light of that, that a source may be judged historically reliable if we can verify many of its major claims, many of its intermediate claims, and many of its lesser claims. So what does Bart Ehrman make of these major gospel claims? Bart, the skeptic, agrees the Gospels are probably right about all these major claims, all these intermediate claims, and all these lesser claims. And that's quite a lot. I would say that this is enough to judge the Gospels historically reliable.
Now, miracle claims were not on that list of things that you would affirm. Wouldn't those be more important than the things Jimmy called the major claims?
Well, I'll tell you, I thought it was a bit ridiculous for him to be quoting my book to say that I agree with him. As if like I didn't know what I wrote in my book.
Oh no, Jimmy assures us that was a very clever strategy.
And so what I did was I said, let's use Bart's own work against him. So I went through Bart's works in one of his books in particular and found where he agrees that the Gospels are right on all these major claims. And he agrees the Gospels are right on all these intermediate claims. And he agrees the Gospels are right on all these minor claims. And he's actually only criticizing a handful of minor claims. So he has not, even if we grant him that the Gospels were not right about these minor claims, which I don't grant, but even if we were to grant that, it doesn't counterbalance the dozens of things he agrees they're right about. And so Bart Ehrman himself concedes the data that shows the Gospels are reliable. Well, I knew that he wasn't going to be able to argue against that. That puts him in an impossible position of disavowing his own work. So he's going to, he could quibble and say, well, I changed my mind on a couple of these points, but he's got to acknowledge he has said that this stuff is reliable. And so I knew he agreed to that. I put him in this terrible position because I've using his own words to prove his case.
How did he react to that during the debate? Do you think it caught him a little bit off guard?
I think it definitely caught him off guard because it's the first time I've ever seen that happen to him. I watched multiple debates where he was debating other people on the same topic, and none of them took that approach. So I don't think he was expecting to have his own words thrown back in his face.
My point is, on some things that they're right. A lot of things, he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. That's a big thing. Was Jesus' death an atonement for sins? Not according to Luke. Luke gets rid of the atonement for sins. You can go down some did Jesus call himself God? Well, no. Not in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so they're big things, and they're intermediate things, and there are lots and lots of small things that don't meet his list. And so if you just kind of choose which, 3 you want to have, then sure, check your box. But so, I don't know, some of those arguments just struck me as so ridiculous, I couldn't believe that people were actually buying them. But I, probably should have said it like this. So, right, what was your question?
Well, the question was, he didn't include miracle claims.
Oh, yeah, no, miracles, right. Yeah, so, well, what are you going to say? The thing is, you cannot prove that a miracle did not happen. How would you prove that a particular miracle didn't happen? So it's not susceptible to proof. It's also not susceptible to proof that it did happen. And so to show that they're reliable, you'd have to show that they did happen. Well, how do you show that? You say, well, a lot of people, a lot of books say they did. Okay. So I think the problem with miracle is that since it's not susceptible of proof or disproof, that it's not really that useful in the debate about reliability. You see what I mean? Unless people are willing to concede that miracles don't happen, which I personally don't think they do. But other people say, well, that's just your anti-supernaturalist bias. And I don't remember if he said that, but he probably did. He probably said that I have an anti-supernaturalist bias, since most apologists do. Even though when I was a supernaturalist, I didn't think you could prove miracles.
From my perspective, Jimmy was expecting the audience to conclude that if the Gospels are reliable on mundane natural claims, that they should consider the Gospels equally reliable about miracle claims.
I hope he doesn't really think that. I mean, it's kind of like these apologists who say that if Luke knows exactly where Bethany was, and Luke understands how far Nazareth was from Jerusalem, and if Luke understands, what the temple size was, therefore his stories about Jesus are accurate. As if knowing geographical details means that the narrative you tell is correct. You can know the geographical details and just make stuff up. It's got no relevance to it. So does this. I mean, this is right, therefore the miracles are right. What? That doesn't make any sense.
In the debate, you brought up an analogy about New York.
Suppose I tell you that there's a city, New York City, and it's the biggest city in the United States. It's located in New York State. It has a great theater district. There's a financial district. And so I give big facts about New York City and say, oh yeah, that's basically reliable. But then I look at my sources, and one of my sources says that Manhattan has 6 million people in it, and another says it has 20 million people in it. One source says it's on the Hudson River, another says it's on the Mississippi River. One says it's 30% African American, another source says it's 80% African American. One says that the Empire State Building is in Manhattan, another says it's in Brooklyn. One says the baseball teams are the Mets and the Yankees, and the other said, no, it's the Dodgers and the Angels. One says that it's the headquarters of the CIA. One says that there's only one international airport there. And so, I mean, you could just go down the list, and if we had more than 20 minutes, the list for the gospel would be very, very long indeed.
What I really wanted was for you to say that one of those sources claims that New York was the home to a super-powered hero named Spider-Man. Would that have helped drive home the differences between mundane claims and miracle claims?
I don't know, because he would point out that I agree that there was a Jesus. And so he would say there's no Spider-Man, but there was a Jesus. And so it doesn't really quite work.
But Peter Parker's superpowers aren't a given just because of the Statue of Liberty.
I wouldn't use Spider-Man as the thing. What I would do is I would say, and New York is where Bill Clinton was born. Something like that would be, that would be good. I thought I did use an example about Chapel Hill as well, that involves me.
You often use that one, but not in this particular debate.
Okay. They could write an account of Bart Ehrman teaching at University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in the year, 2014, that he taught a class on the introduction to the New Testament, and he went to Hamilton Hall in order to teach this class. But before he got to Hamilton Hall, the hall had been blown up. There was a gas explosion, and it blown up the entire house, and 300 people were killed. Okay, well, they got my name right. They got the date right. They got the place right. Chapel Hill is right. Hamilton is where I was teaching the class. They have all the details right. The story is flat out wrong.
Right. Yeah. Now, do you think the debate would have gone differently if you two had pre-agreed on a definition of reliability? Or does that destroy the spirit of the debate if you get into that kind of definition beforehand?
Yeah, I think it destroys the purpose of the debate. I do debates with my undergraduate classes where every student has to participate in a debate. One of the interesting things is that often they come down to definitions of terms. For example, I do a debate with my students, resolved the Apostle Paul's views of women were oppressive. And many times the debate comes down to the verb, were. Were they, as opposed to today they might be, but were they oppressive? And, how do you define, what? So they're almost always, I do another debate, resolve the New Testament condemns homosexuality. Well, how do you define homosexuality? That is the issue, because, if you're talking about sexual acts between two people of the same sex, then yes, it does condemn that. If you're talking about sexuality as an orientation, then no, it doesn't condemn that. There wasn't such a thing in the ancient world as an orientation towards sexuality. But you only get there by defining the terms. And so I don't object so much to, I don't think there's a way that you're going to be able to define a term in advance and get both people to agree to it, because he's going to have a different definition of the term than I do.
So in this debate, your intent and purpose going in was to convince the crowd that your definition of reliability is better than Jimmy's definition of reliability?
Well, I didn't realize it had gone badly for me, frankly. I absolutely didn't think that. But for me, it's not my definition or his definition. For me, it's what a person's who listening to it, what their definition is. If you can show that Mark records sayings of Jesus that are not actually things that he said, or that John has a view of Jesus that is not historically correct, or that Matthew says things about Jesus' birth that simply did not happen. If you can convince them of that, then in their mind, do they still think it's accurate? And most people think that the things Matthew says, or Mark says, or John says happened. And if you show they didn't happen, then it's up to them to decide, well, so the term reliable doesn't mean much. I don't think it matters much to me what the term is, what the term you use. The question is this something that happened or not?
Would you agree in hindsight that focusing on contradictions isn't going to hit an audience of Catholics that already reject sola scriptura as heavily as that might impact someone like you and me who come out of a more inerrancy position?
I assume you grew up Protestant?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Protestants tend to think that if you've got contradictions, oh my God, you got problems. And I think they assume that since Catholics don't care about the Bible, that doesn't matter. And in my experience, Catholics also get unnerved by contradictions. If they're big, they're significant. And it makes them rethink what the Bible is because they just assume that it's the Word of God. So I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I don't have a problem with somebody thinking that the Gospels contain reliable information. Of course they do. I don't, if they think they're basically the same, okay. But, you can go point by point by point by point by point, which is what I try to do, is to show actually that, that this can't be right, this can't be right, this can't be right. And at some point, somebody has to say, yeah, actually, that's not right. I mean, it's like, this book is not. And so if they want to say, well, it's not completely accurate, but it is basically reliable. It kind of reminds me of the move happening within Protestant circles with somebody like Michael Licona, for example, who will say that Matthew contradicts Mark in this place about what Jesus said, that both cannot be historically correct, that Matthew changed Mark into something that is not historically correct, and Matthew is inerrant. Okay, so that's nice that you want to use that word for it, but I mean, the word isn't what really matters to me. It's like, what? You're saying that Matthew reports Jesus said something that, in fact, you agree Jesus did not say. Well, okay, you can call that inerrant if you want, but in my mind, that means it's recording something he didn't say. And I want to read Jesus' words to know what he did say. I don't care what you call it.
I realized that, so Bart has a fundamentalist background.
Right.
And that affects what he considers reliable when it comes to Scripture, because he has an approach where if everything is not literally true,
yes,
and literally precise in its details, then he's going to say it's unreliable. But that's a ridiculous standard for reliability.
No, I think it's a ridiculous argument. I mean, I'll tell you why I think it's ridiculous. I wasn't a fundamentalist for the first 15 years of my life. I was a fundamentalist for 7 years, and I was a Christian for decades after that. So I was a Christian for decades before and Christian decades after. For most of my Christian life, I was not somebody who believes in inerrancy, including as a scholar. I mean, I remained a Christian. I mean, I was still a Christian all the years I taught at Rutgers, the 4 years I was at Rutgers, and I was a Christian when I was at Chapel Hill, teaching at UNC Chapel Hill. So it wasn't like I thought, one day I woke up and realized there's an error in the Gospel of Mark. Oh my God, I'm not a Christian anymore. It was like I was a Christian without an inerrantist view for most of my life. So I think that's just building a straw man and knocking him down.
Gotcha. That is how they were painting you, though, that you woke up one day and
I know
discovered an error. Yeah.
Well, I mean, people do that in print. I mean, Craig Evans one time wrote a book that said the reason I became a non-Christian was because I realized that there were variants among the New Testament manuscripts. He said this in print. I called him up. I said, what are you talking about? I mean, he's a friend of mine. That's not true at all. I knew there were variants when I was a fundamentalist. But, people get this in their head, so they say it. And then people believe it because they hear it.
That's an example of a legendary development happening within the lifetime of the person. That's interesting.
Oh, no, that can't happen. It takes 50 or 60 years before somebody will change a story.
And someone could cross-check it. It could never happen. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, the first thing that Bart said to me privately as soon as the debate was over is that that he didn't like the framing of the debate because it required him to prove a negative.
He said that to you privately after the debate? Yeah.
Yes, while we were still on stage.
Oh, really?
And that told me...
That almost sounds like an admission. Like, I just lost this debate. And I wish...
What it told me is he didn't do as well as he had hoped he wanted, because if you have done as well as you hope to do, the first thing you say privately is not to criticize the way the debate proposition was framed.
Yeah, that you agreed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I not only didn't admit in stage, I've never thought I lost that debate.
Okay.
Maybe people watching think, man, okay, Bart got cricked. Boy, I didn't think so. And so I don't know what I would have been complaining about. I don't remember complaining about the format.
I think the insinuation was the complaining that you had taken on the burden of proof, that the question was weird or something like that.
Oh, well, I probably did say, it is kind of weird. I probably after said, it's kind of weird if we're debating it like this, because, I probably said something like that. Absolutely, it wasn't because I thought I got beat.
Okay.
And so I just, I mean, and he came up with weird things, and I don't know, sometimes I was kind of floored by them. The idea that you can reconcile the birth narratives of Matthew and Luke, because, in Matthew, the home of Joseph and Mary is in Bethlehem, and in Nazareth in Luke, and that, it's not the same. And his view is they have a vacation home in Bethlehem. I think, what the world? Are you serious? It's like, you just got to wonder what is. And of course, people there, they don't know how weird that is because they don't know about the economic situation in ancient Israel. But anyone who does is scratching their heads, say, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. Really? They got a vacation home? A second home? What are they go to Florida?
I've never heard that one before. That's amazing. Oh, wow. Okay.
That's how you reconcile it. Wow, really?
So moving on from the Gospels to one of the sequels of the Gospels, you've got a new course talking about the Book of Acts. That's a book I memorized in high school and was one of my favorites back in the day. But you, sir, were influential in me changing my mind about Acts, and I now think it's garbage. And yet, here you are, promoting a course called The Genius of Acts. How dare you, sir, try to sell me on Acts being a work of genius?
Well,
explain yourself.
I'm not saying it's historically accurate. You don't have to be a genius to be historically accurate, and to be historically accurate, it doesn't make you a genius. And so, they're different things. It's genius for other reasons, really genius for literary reasons. This author is very interesting in lots of ways that people don't pick up on as a rule. I mean, I know I never picked up on a lot of this. Some of the literary things that he does are really quite brilliant. The way he ties what happens to the apostles in the story of the Book of Acts, where you're talking about the spread of Christianity throughout the ancient world during the first 30 years. The things that happened in the lives of the apostles reflect the things that had happened in the life of Jesus. And there are these parallels between them, and you realize, wait a second, Jesus did this, the apostles did that. And then you get within Acts itself, and the things Peter does gets reflected in the things that Paul does, and the speeches of Peter. Man, you can't tell if it's Peter speaking or Paul speaking, because their speeches, and say, man, this is really good. It's very artistic. And so there is a genius to it, but the genius does not reside in historical accuracy. So this would be another thing that Jimmy and I could easily debate, because when the Book of Acts, says something about Paul that Paul also says about himself, all you got to do is compare the two and see whether they agree. And that's the problem. They don't many, many times. So the course will be both about the kind of the literary features of this and what the author's doing and how it fits together and the themes and the kind of the brilliance of the narrative, and evaluating it as a historical document for what actually happened.
Okay, so we're doing both. All right, so I'm reassured now. But so it sounds like this be even people who are into just the ancient literature in general, this course?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it's, one of the interesting thing about Luke and Acts, they really do appear to be two volumes of one book. In other words, Luke had, whoever the author was, we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about this too, it appears to be by the same person. But the interesting thing, we have lots of multi-volume works from the ancient world where people write in multiple volumes, in part because if you're writing on a scroll, You know, something like the book of Luke is all you can get on the scroll. You can't also get Acts on the scroll. The scrolls aren't big enough. And so people write in multi-volumes. But the weird thing is, I don't know of any other multi-volume works where the first and second volumes are different genres of literature. That's weird because normally it's like, it's like one continuous story. And Luke is a continuous story, but in different genres. Right? One is a biography and one is like a general history. And so, wow, that's interesting.
That reminds me of the new Joker, just because I'm a comic guy, that reminds me of the new Joker movies. The first Joker movie is social commentary, second Joker movie is a musical. Who knows?
Yeah, well, and the second one hasn't been doing too well.
No, that's what I hear as well. Everyone's time is probably better spent on your course, which is not a musical. If you want to get all these insights into the Book of Acts for yourself, you can go to tinyurl.com/BartActs. And if you use that link, you'll not only be investing in your own education, but you'll also be helping the mission of this channel, which I greatly appreciate.
Well, thanks. Let me just say, I really am looking forward to this Acts course because there's going to be 8 lectures and I'm going to hit some of this stuff pretty deep. And so I hope people can come. But thank you. And thank you for letting me know I should have debated differently.
Always here for that.
Yeah, good.
Thanks. If you'd like to see more of Bart Ehrman and me taking a look at the claims of Christians, tap on the thumbnail on screen now for our Team Up playlist, and I'll see you over there. Until next time, later.